Thank you, Nina. Really appreciate you being part of XRDI, which is India's first AR/VR podcast. To my listeners who don't know about you, I'm going to give them a brief introduction and then we can get into the conversation. So Miss Nina Salomons is an award-winning filmmaker and XR creative producer and consultant. She has worked in the XR space since 2015. Is one of the co-founders of the Women in VR meetup group. She's an XR journalist for 2.5 years and worked on creating, developing, and using immersive technologies for various companies and brands. She's currently working on bringing VR into UK prisons, executing UK immersive events, and working on her own VR film. Nina, it's a pleasure to have you on XR podcast. So this is something which I pulled off the net. So I think it always works better, if we hear it from the mouth of the person who I'm interviewing. So you have my little pre-conversation before I got into the starting the podcast. You've been doing quite a lot of things. So would you like to kind of summarize who Nina is and what drives you and what you've been doing?
Sure. So I have a background in filmmaking. I studied filmmaking for 5 years. And I also did a lot of video games. So I had a YouTube channel dedicated to playing video games, and essentially pre-Twitch, pre-Google buying YouTube, I was very heavily involved in the gaming scene, and I love science fiction. It's probably one of my favorite genres. And I love playing Mass Effect. I love the idea of nonlinear storytelling. And really what drew me into AR and VR was going to a conference where I first saw augmented reality. Someone handed me an iPad. I scanned a QR code. This was, I think, back in 2014 or 15. And I think it was a T-Rex popped out at me, and then a building. And they were moving my hands with the iPad backwards and forwards, left and right. And I realized that I was interacting with the 3D objects, and I could zoom inside the building. I could see the people walking around the building, and I'd never seen anything like this before. And to have it being held by my hands with an iPad, I thought, this is revolutionary. This is happening right now. I need to get involved. So I went to every single meetup and event that I could possibly go to for about a year. And then I essentially knew everybody. I knew everything. And I said, okay, the rooms that I'm in, there's only 1 or 2 women in there, in a room full of like 30 to 40, 50 people. And my experience in the film and gaming industry, I got a lot of slack for being a woman. And so I thought we need to ensure that the communities in the immersive field are also equal representation, have a safe space for women to feel like they can come forward and create content, because it can't just be all of these white guys in suits. So that's kind of how I set up the Women in VR meetup group with Amandine Flack and Luciana. And all we did really was just wanted to create a space where we could just talk about stuff, like, and thus about VR, AR, 360 film, whatever. And whenever there was a meetup, it was sort of in collaboration with like VR World, for example. So we would sort of, if there was a conference going on, we would all go, hey, let's all go to the conference together and talk about what we saw, what's going on with our projects. And maybe people can end up working together, and something magical would come out of it. And from there on, that's kind of how I got to organizing hackathons for VR. I saw the potential for, I was just very annoyed because I saw technology advancing, and I realized that the creatives were being left behind. I had no idea that most of this stuff existed. I didn't know it existed. So I was like, how can we bring, people with creative concepts and people with information and knowledge together? And I didn't know that hackathons were a thing. I had never done anything in technology before. I come from like a story background. And I was hanging out with a bunch of, I suppose, technologists at WeWork, which was just starting out at the time. And they were like, yeah, you want to organize a hackathon? And a lot of people were like, who are you? Why are you here? What is a filmmaker doing here? And I was like, I have a right to be here. And I think there's an opportunity here for growth. So I organized a medical hackathon. And in my head, I was like, can we scan people and show them their organs? So we can show them, for example, if they're smoking, that their lungs are slowly, getting ill, and we could sort of show them themselves like what it looks like. The technology wasn't there at the time. So instead what we focused on was haptics and how you could use that in a medical way. And actually a company came out of the hackathon, which was really cool. It had to do with CPR training. So they created a dummy puppet and it was all about CPR training. And they now use it like in the NHS, which is really amazing and fantastic. From there on out, like I was doing some work as a journalist, and that's really where I learned who the leaders were. I went to lots of conferences and events, and I also led something called the VR Diversity Initiative. So the Women in VR meetup group, the intention was to sort of create it into you want a job in XR, we will get you a job in XR. We will train you up, and we will then, talk to recruiters. That never happened, but XRDI sort of took that over. And that was all about, okay, if you have no skills in XR, we train you, you create a prototype in a single day, you're part of a community, and then you can decide whether you want to be part of VR, AR, or if you want to go get a grant. Now you know that you can actually create a 360 film. It's not that difficult. Really was about giving you the boost of confidence to be able to create something and realize that you have the potential to do it without a lot of help. You just need a little bit of advice, a little bit of help from the community, and you can do it. And that's something that I never got. So I guess I was kind of, I'm jealous of the people who attended my workshops, because like, I wish I could do that like years ago. So I guess I was sort of creating the vibe, the community for people to enter the industry, things that I wish I had. But instead of doing it myself, I organized it for other people. I also was, I think at the time, making 360 films for branded content. So I was learning a lot about 360 cameras, how to film with them, and stitching the footage together, which is just so difficult and horrible. But I mean, this was years ago, and it's so much better now. Like you can just stick something on your phone and hold something that is just like like an Insta360 or whatever, and then you can like ski down a hill, and it's like great. So the technology has gone so fast, and I think it's gonna just get better. So more people need to get involved.
Lovely. Thank you, Nina, for sharing your journey. I mean, I can relate to every little thing you said. Like you, I've been building a community. Like you, I started my journey as a filmmaker. My background is in the creative industry. I've spent 20 years playing for a rock band, and then I discovered virtual reality in early 2016, and I was blown away by understanding the potential of what it could do. Obviously Matrix, you said sci-fi, Matrix as a movie was a major driver for me. And then I got a little bit of understanding of quantum mechanics and quantum physics. And then I mean, though my background, my education is nothing, I'm uneducated. I've self-learned everything from the guitar to what I know today is because I'm a extremely curious person. I keep on asking questions, and I guess that's what has defined me as an individual. From 2015 till now, in 5 years, this technology space is grown exponentially, and I feel happy of what India has achieved in this 5 years. There was hardly about maybe 5 startups or 6 startups back in 2015. Today, there's close to 2,000 startups in India, which is AR, VR, MR focused. So I'm very happy for the ecosystem. So filmmaking, I think storytelling is going to be redefined with AR, VR, MR. For 100 years, or 2D cinema of flat content, it's taken over 100 years to evolve, right? And still, it is non-interactive. We sit and we watch, and we get emotionally charged up in ways which is unimaginable we laugh, we cry. So creative, whether it's your filmmaking or music, has that capability to completely touch humans in ways which is unimaginable. And this medium which has been there has been a flat medium so far. Now we are getting into that interactive world where it's interactive storytelling, experiential story experiencing, and things like that. We're just scratching the surface. Could you, as a filmmaker, talk more about this technology or a medium? Where does the opportunity lie? And if somebody who's getting into this medium, how would you want to explain him where does the current technology stand, why he or she should get into it, and what is going to be the future of storytelling?
Whew, 3 questions. Okay, let me try and remember all of them. So one of the reasons I wanted to get into the space was because my goal was to make a film that really changed the way people thought about things. I was really influenced by a film at the London Film Festival called White Elephant. And it's a film that touches upon people living in the slums and, corruption. And I thought, like, this was such an incredible film. Like, just hearing the filmmaker's, story. I love documentaries that really sort of put you in the space. And I thought, from my gaming experience, the first person perspective, that filmmakers and gamers are the 2 sectors are now overlapping heavily, very, very heavily. If you watch The Mandalorian, you can see now that they're using Unreal Engine for filmmaking and for television. And even now in COVID, they required us more than ever because of people not being, like, a large number of people not being allowed in a room. So you can see a huge overlap. And at first it started off with, like, my favorite composer, like Hans Zimmer, doing, like, music composition for video games. And if you look at music composition, it has to react to things that happen in a video game, very similar to a movie. And when it comes to interactive content, I thought, oh man, I've lived in like 10 different countries growing up, and I've seen people being shot, and I've seen a lot of poverty. But I come here to this place and no one seems to understand what I'm talking about because everything is 2D. And so therefore they can create a barrier between reality and their life. And fair enough, sometimes you've got your own problems and you don't want to see the truth. You don't want to see what's going on. But when you make a movie, you want to sort of put another person in another place and make them really feel for the characters, for the environment. And I thought this has to be the most efficient way to tell a story, to make people really, really feel what it's like to be another person. So instead of being a filmmaker, really, and sort of telling a story, I should be more a theater director. And I've done a lot of musicals, I've done a lot of theater, and sort of this is kind of where my filmmaking, gaming, and theater come together, because I have to create a scenario, a scene where you have a choice and people or the environment respond to you. And then it's not my story anymore, it's your story. You make the decision, you feel for the character. And this is really where I lean back onto Mass Effect, because this franchise, you feel for the characters. There's different storylines happening at the same time. And if you don't decide to do something, a character dies. And I've had a character die on me and I feel grief. I feel remorse. I feel guilty. And I was like, there's got to be something there that you can bring into virtual reality and filmmaking at the same time. You can create a scenario or a journey where another person, because you're creating that decision, because you're interacting with the story, you feel, because it's your decision. I didn't make the decision for you. You've created the story for yourself, and therefore it has more impact. So that's kind of like one of the reasons I was like, okay, VR has like real potential here for storytelling. Things from gaming and theater started coming in, and immersive theater, when I started going into immersive tech, was a big deal. It was a really, really big deal. Secret Cinema in London was happening, I think, all the time. So, you know, when you go to the set and you see the people responding and acting and you're part of that environment, you really are transported. And it's like being on a film set. And I was like, there's something here. I don't think that immersive content per se will destroy 2D storytelling or gaming. Just like, you know, when television came out, it didn't destroy radio or books. People were like, oh no, you're going to destroy us. It's terrible. But really, it's just a different format. Certain people want to be more actively involved. Other people don't want to be involved. They want to be passive. People can make choices. Don't like force things onto them. But I think like nowadays, a lot of interaction is happening on our phones, a lot of interaction. People are understanding gaming more now than ever before. I actually made a documentary called Gamer Girls. This was sort of pre-Gamergate. And, you know, I really tackled like what it was like being a female gamer online, the hate that you got online for it, how people perceived you when you said you were a female gamer. And at the time, people were like, you're weird, you're very strange. But then I'm like sitting on the tube, you're on your phone, you're playing that bubble game or whatever it's called. And I'm like, you're a gamer. You're like, you think we're weird, but you're gaming yourself. If you play chess on your phone on the way to work, or if you play any of these mobile games, you're a gamer. If you play board games, you're a gamer. And so people are starting to understand interactivity more because it's a part of their daily life. And I think that's really sort of like the beginning of I suppose, the public understanding interactive content. One of the questions that you had before was like, which content would I have wanted to be part of? And I think that goes into why is it important?
Right.
Inaratu created a VR experience called Carne Arena. And I was at Cannes Film Festival when they were showcasing it. I couldn't get tickets for it because it was so exclusive. And my father works with refugees. So this was a combination of my worlds sort of colliding. It was refugees and migrants, and it was virtual reality. Inaratu is an incredible filmmaker. He moves the camera around. He understands the fluidity. Spielberg understands it too. When the camera sort of moves and pans and tilts, it gives you the feeling like you're there. And I think he immediately understood the potential of virtual reality. And he went, I'm going to make a combination of film and sort of immersive theater. And he hired out a whole warehouse and put sand in it and put a VR headset, and like people had to become migrants crossing the border. They were involved in it. And he won, I think he won an Oscar for that. Right. Like it was the beginning of people who were snobby about immersive. And he went in there straight up and went, this is how you create a story. He, as a filmmaker, understood the power of storytelling. And I think when it comes to young filmmakers nowadays, I think you have to be a little bit careful, because as a filmmaker, if you don't play video games, there's already a little bit of a barrier, because you have the frame. The first thing you learn is you've got the frame. You learn how to frame things in it and out of it, and composition and lighting. In VR, it doesn't work that way. In 360 film, you cannot hide. So if you have ever gone on a 360 film shoot, you have to consider hiding behind a tree or under a rock, and like, you know, you have to think about how fast your camera is moving. It's a completely different way of telling a story. So as a filmmaker, I recommend you to destroy the frame. Destroy the frame and think about it as you as a person. Think of immersive theater, that those guys have a complete understanding of what VR is supposed to be doing. And think of video games. Video games, you can move your camera around. And that is as a person. So if you were to say, for example, go into a social VR place, I'm going to give you Alt Space for an example. That's a space where lots of people in VR, you can just attend by a laptop. You can see what it's like in a sort of game experience, and you will not feel completely present. But once you go into VR and you understand that how you move, that is your frame, you sort of have more of an understanding of storytelling. My thinking of what the future of VR could be has to do a lot with, I suppose, neuroscience. One of my, I suppose, VR experiences where I was completely blown away is called Buddy VR. And it is directed by Chuck Che. It was an experience that accompanied a feature film, the Buddy film. And in this experience, you have non-linear decisions, but it's so passive that you don't actually know. It's directed by gaze. So you can decide whether something happens just by looking at it. And it was so interesting because Chuck was standing next to me as I was playing the experience, and he was just going, interesting. And he was just analyzing my decisions. And I was just like, And he was like, if you had done this a little bit sooner, if you had decided to help that person out, the story would have been completely different. This would have happened. And I was like, wow, this is like gaming and film coming together, but I haven't even used my controllers. I've just used my head, and I didn't feel like there was a loading screen going on, or anything like that. So there's already, sensors with EEGs that can guide traditional 2D films already. You can make that. But I think virtual reality is going into the direction where it's your own passive experience. It'll be non-linear. When I say passive, I mean you're not aware that you're making a decision. And I'm trying to make a VR film that only uses eye tracking. So it'd be looking at your biometric biometric pupils in your eyes, and it'd be analyzing how you feel. So the scenario and the characters would change depending on how you feel, but you're not aware that you're making a decision. The experience is making it for you. And that's really, really tricky because funding for stuff like that is almost inexistent. But that's kind of where I think the future will go. I think the experience will be passive in a sense that you're not aware you're making the decision. I also think it'll be looking at how you feel, so biometrics and EEGs. And I also think it will probably be an exchange of VR and AR. So you can see a lot of headsets coming out there like, oh, we're mixed reality. So hopefully in the future, you just be able to go oh, this is VR. Oh, now it's AR. But that gives you, as a creator, a lot of freedom to decide how you want to tell your story. You can even play with the two different mediums. And I'm just getting excited about just talking about it. You can create different portals into different worlds, like a sort of sci-fi Harry Potter, Rick and Morty, and you jump in and suddenly it's virtual reality. And you look back and it's that's your room, So there's so much creativity that you can really play around with. But really look at immersive theater first, then look at gaming, and then figure out non-linear film as part of that.
I am super excited where the future of storytelling is going. I mean, you mentioned, when you're shooting a 2D film, you're looking at a frame. So I remember my experience. I don't have a film background whatsoever, but the first film which I did was a VR film. So I had a friend of mine who's one of the top DOPs here in India. So I asked him if he could come and kind of help me with the 360 film. And I showed him the camera. I made him understand everything. I narrated the script to him. And then he comes up to me and he says, okay, we are going to, since it's a horror film, framing would be, then I was like, no, hang on. The world is your canvas because the camera sees everything. So, and it's only, so no matter how much you tell people, we are so entrenched because I said 100 years it's taken. is so deeply etched into our system that unless and until you don't experience it firsthand, you don't understand the power of potential of it. So you said you're experimenting with theater, films, and gaming, and I feel that is the future where all everything is converging. Right from artificial intelligence with haptic feedbacks, gathering all the data. The future of narrative is going to be extremely excited. I know I'm maybe a little too excited. I'm like a kid because somehow I spend my entire day imagining the future. Uh, Because I think everything that I do or I have done is looking at the lens of what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years, and then create an ecosystem to prepare for that eventual tomorrow and create a business opportunity. Because I believe that's how most of the businesses happen. Because if you have a foresight, you can create those ecosystem right now and start laying the groundwork. The reason I'm saying this is because those filmmakers, those content creators who are so etched into doing 2D content should explore the opportunity that is being presented by experiential storytelling. You mentioned about how some of the top companies are creating head-mounted devices, AR, VR headset, and maybe you could just tap them. It could be an AR device, it could be a VR device, it could be an MR device. Apple's coming into the play, Facebook, Google. I believe that in the next coming decade, a computer and mobile will converge in one single wearable device, and the entire world is going to be a screen. You won't need a TV. Maybe I'm over exaggerating, maybe I'm over expecting, but I'm really excited. You mentioned something very, very critical. I think, you said as a filmmaker, funding is a problem. Yes. So I think you said you're doing something which is going to be concentrating more on your eyes, where with gaze you'll be able to go take an story forward. How easy or difficult is funding, and what should be done to create excitement in the community where the investors, the institutions, or the government understand the OTT players, the studios, and says, okay, this is it. I mean, I'm not saying the 2D medium is dying out. I'm not saying, but eventually, if you see everything like we said, the radio is never going to die out. Like when the TV came, but the importance of radio died out, and TV became more important. So the same way, I think right now what's happening is very evident. Because of COVID, theaters, which has been a medium where we go socially to watch content, is losing importance because OTT is taking over. So I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I feel that in another 10 years, when we have devices like this, which can give you the power to view content at the price point, maybe 10 times or 100 times cheaper than what happens in the theater experience right now. Because if you go to a theater, A, the tickets are expensive. B, it's the eatables are expensive, the popcorns are expensive, and you go without a family or friends, so it becomes an expensive affair. I'm saying 10 years down the line, when we have devices like this, and we'll be able to. So I'm excited about that. So anyway, coming back to the point, funding. How do you think we can create an ecosystem where we can nudge the investors or the community to come together and see the benefit of adopting and implementing AR, VR content and nurture content creators such as yourself and others?
This is such a tricky question because I was part of Modern Tales, which was funded by Skillset for sort of emerging filmmakers. And I never really ended up making a film because I was doing Immersive. And now that I'm in Immersive, I thought I was about to make, some amazing content, and then COVID hit. And really, COVID's changed everything. COVID's changed everything when it comes to investment and funding. And it's completely different to I would say 2019. the funding has changed because a lot of governments are losing trade, import, exports, supply chains. And this has an impact on the economy because they're not making enough money, they're going in debt. And when it comes to being a content creator, I think really, sadly, now the future is training. So this is my advice to content creators out there right now. It is get a headset, get good Wi-Fi, and get into training. And if you do not know how to code, if you do not know 3D modeling, then my advice would be to go into social virtual reality and create worlds in there. I do this. I prototype in social VR and get into that community, learn the rules, because the amazing part about virtual reality is you can simulate the real world in VR. There are a few other things that you can and cannot do, but you should explore that. And when you learn how to make the world, you are already making mistakes. You are doing. So filmmaking is very much an act of doing. And if you are unable to go and get a 360 camera and shoot things because of COVID and you have to stay indoors, you have to shoot or whatever, just go into virtual reality and shoot something in there. You can already do that in a 2D way. You can just use your phone, or you can use your computer. There are already more open platform, social VR experiences out there. Now, once you learn the skills of creating a story or an experience in an environment with other people, you are already becoming a VR filmmaker to some degree. If you have a 360 film camera, import your content into those worlds and ask people for advice, ask people for help. The community is extremely supportive and they will give you advice. Absolute random strangers across the world will go, I like this, but I don't like this. And I sort of am part of a VR community where we do this. I organize meetups in Mozilla hubs, for example, and we then go, does anybody want to showcase or present any of their work? And these are all VR, AR content creators. And someone goes, yeah, I want a 360 film. Cool, great. Put it inside a sphere. All 30 of us are going, ooh, I like this bit. I don't like that bit. It's like and for the filmmaker, it was very strange because he was like, I usually, when you're watching a film, you just kind of sit outside of the experience. You're never part of the experience, but you could do that in social VR. You can invite people to watch your 360 film content, get feedback, or you can even ticket it if you want to do it by Eventbrite. You can create a virtual reality social VR film festival. And a lot of people have been doing that. Look at Sundance, look at South by Southwest, look at a lot of the film festivals right now. They're attempting to do that. It's not perfect, but it's good. And Museum of Other Realities is one of my favorite experiences because it's actually used for art. However, they've also used it for film festivals and for conferences. And there, you've got something really special, which you don't have on any other social VR platform, which is the ability to become tiny and the ability to become huge. And so, for example, if you've created a world, an art piece that's, say, the size of a table, a small table, and you're like with a group of, 30, 50 people, you just go, guys, I want to, my experience is on this table. And you're like, what are you talking about? And then you go into it and you go, and it's like Alice in Wonderland and you're small. And you can look at all the people outside and you're like, this is insane. Like, this is absolutely amazing. So really, it's really shifting your perspective of how can you tell stories. And COVID has blocked a lot of these things. Your only way now to get proper funding for stuff is if your government is interested in growing this field. So if your government is interested, they're probably going into AI, 5G, like the Internet of Things. And then it's a matter of like, okay, I've learned my skills. Now, is there a company that is working in that field, and how can I put myself in the position to help them create that content? And it's going to be training, or it's like a faster, easier way of, I don't know, capturing 360 content and making it into 3D characters, something having to do with AI, along those lines. And that's really where money is. So you have to get very technical nowadays, which is a little bit annoying because you didn't require that so much before. But film festivals are realizing, okay, we need to find a solution for this. And it's not only film festivals, it's conferences as well. It's a bunch of other, huge conferences that are realizing, Zoom calls, it's just not cutting it anymore. And if you look at all of the other big, events where like thousands of people are present, they've gamified it. They've had to gamify it. And now you're like opening the minds to people, and they're like, there has to be another way of talking to lots of people. And the benefit of going into VR versus 2D is spatial audio. You can just have a side conversation with the person you want to speak to, and no one else can listen to your conversation. And that is a huge benefit that people like don't really think about. So it kind of allows you that privacy that like Zoom doesn't allow when one person has to raise their hand. But if one person speaks and they're saying something interesting, you're like, I got to speak to them. You can't. It's over. Once you're at a conference, you can say like, hey, can we just speak here in the corner? Or let's, Zoom to be tiny and like have a tiny conversation. You can do that in social VR. Obviously, it requires onboarding and training and et cetera, but there's so much possibility. And if you just, again, I'm just going to, emphasize, go into the social VR community, go onto Twitch, go onto YouTube, go onto Twitter, because there's an incredible amount of people in COVID that are just at home trying to socialize with people, talk to people. And you have never had a more perfect opportunity ever to meet so many talented people online and ask them for help and ask them for questions. And who knows, they might be like working for some like Hollywood 3D, VFX thing. And they're like, oh yeah, we're doing some VR stuff. And then you can say, how can I help? What can I do? What do I need to learn? And they might give you some advice. So that's kind of like my advice for right now, which is a very different advice that I had like when I was doing a diversity initiative. But right now, I think it's actually kind of like the perfect pivotal moment for you to enter the space because of the people that are there.
Thank you, Nina. It was a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, understand your journey. You yourself have had a great story. You were adopted. You are somebody who everybody would want to look up to. You're doing a great job by building a community and playing a role in making people understand and creating a diverse and inclusive world, because the future is coming so fast. All of these technologies which we are most of them are in a very nascent stage, and we are just scratching the surface, be it augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, synthetic biology. These are transformational technologies. These are so powerful that in the coming decades, we humans are going to be godlike. This power that we are on the verge of grasping, it's people like you, us, to create a community and include everyone and make everyone understand, whether it's it's a colored individual or it's whatever. I mean, the differences. We are more alike than different, and genetics prove 99.9% of the entire human race of it's similar. It's that 1% which makes the entire human race so different. So that itself is so awesome, and everybody can have a great story if you choose to. Your effort in enabling and empowering everyone is noteworthy. I respect you for that. And keep on doing what you're doing, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, Nina. I really appreciate this. Yeah?
Thank you.